Welcome to my channel. These aren't just horror stories. These are puzzles. By the time you get to the end, you'll realize you missed something terrifying hiding in plain sight. First up, today's terrifying trip. I drive for a rideshare app. One night I picked up a quiet woman from the edge of town. She gave me the address, and I set off into the dark. It was one of those nights where the tall trees lining the road seemed to close in around the car, turning the street into a tunnel of darkness. Their gnarled branches clawed at the car like skeletal fingers. I gripped the steering wheel, willing myself not to think about how easily a falling branch could shatter the window and plunge us into darkness. But then my passenger stirred, reaching out to touch my arm. I jumped, yanking my arm back as if she'd touched me. "Sorry," she said quietly. "I didn't mean to startle you." Her voice startled me more than her touch. It was so unexpectedly close to my ear. I'd been so focused on my own fear that I didn't realize she'd moved so close. She smelled faintly of lavender and something else. Something that tugged at the back of my memory, something unsettling. I forced myself to turn and smile at her, hoping she couldn't see how my hands were shaking. "No worries," I managed to say, my voice unnaturally bright. "It's just, this is a pretty creepy road." She nodded slowly, her eyes fixed on something in her lap. "Yeah," she whispered, her gaze distant. Then abruptly, she spoke again, her voice sharper now. "Stop at the next street corner. I need to get off there." The street she wanted to get off was barely a road. It was barely anything, really. Just a barely discernible path through the trees with no streetlights and barely any road. I stared at her, stunned. "Are you sure?" I finally managed to ask, my voice tight. "There's nothing there. It's just a dirt road." She didn't answer for a long moment. When she did, her voice was a near whisper. "I'm sorry, but I have to get out here. Please, can you do this?" Her eyes, I realized with a jolt, were filled with terror. They weren't the same as before. I wasn't sure what to do. I wanted to help her, to reassure her, but all I could muster was okay. I turned the car around and drove towards the dirt road. As we approached the spot, she clutched my arm so tightly that her nails dug into my skin. I winced, meeting her panicked eyes. I didn't want to hurt her, but I also didn't want to put her in danger. I pulled over, killed the engine, and opened the door for her. She fumbled with her scarf, wrapping it around herself as if for protection. Then she stepped out of the car and into the darkness. I watched her go. My heart pounded against my ribs. Then, as I sat there in the sudden silence, I heard a faint cry carried on the wind, a sob that echoed through the trees. It was then that I noticed the back seat was empty. She'd never been there. I raced out of there, not bothering to grab her scarf, my foot slamming down on the accelerator. As I drove, I glanced at the passenger seat, half expecting to see her sitting there, but it was empty. I slowed down, my eyes scanning the road ahead. There, on the side of the road, lay her scarf. I pulled over and got out, picking it up and holding it to my nose, inhaled deeply, trying to catch her scent one last time. Lavender and something else, something vaguely metallic like old blood. I shuddered, dropping the scarf back onto the seat. I knew I should call the police. But who would believe me? A non-existent passenger, an empty car. What would they say? That I'd lost my mind? I kept driving, the events of the night replaying in my mind over and over again. Then I remembered the dash cam. Shaking, I pulled the car over and grabbed my phone. I found the clip of our ride together, but it wasn't what I expected. In fact, it was worse. In the video, the passenger seat was empty the entire ride. And as I watched, I realized just how much worse things could have been if she had stayed there. The first story is called The Clock in the Wall. So I recently moved into an old house with my wife and 2 kids. The house was built in 1920 and is full of creaks, groans, and pops. My youngest child has a clock in his room that ticks quite loudly. However, we can never hear it during the day because of all the other noises the house makes. But at night, when the house is quiet, we can hear the clock. We assumed that the clock was just outside our son's room, and we could hear it in our daughter's room too. So we went out and bought a white noise machine to drown out the sound. One night we were in bed and we could still hear the ticking. It didn't matter how much white noise we played. This is when I started to suspect that the ticking was actually coming from inside the wall. To test this theory, I pressed my ear to the wall, and sure enough, there was a faint but distinct ticking coming from inside. I told my wife I was going to break a hole in the wall, and she said, "Go for it." So I got some wire cutters and made a small hole in the drywall. The next morning after, of course being woken up by the incessant ticking all night, my wife was not happy. She said, "You have to fix that hole. It looks terrible." So I agreed and fixed the hole and covered it with some paint. However, that night, we could still hear the ticking, so I made the hole bigger. Once again, the next morning my wife was not pleased. She said, "You're lucky the kids haven't noticed that hole yet. You need to fix that thing before they do." So once again, I fixed the hole. This time I made it large enough to put my whole head in the hole, and I could still hear the ticking. But now I could feel air coming from the wall. As I pressed my face against the hole, I felt something hard. Reached in and grabbed it and pulled it out. It was a small wooden box. I opened the box and found an antique-looking pocket watch. The watch still had the key in it, and it was still running. My wife was amazed. She said, "I knew it. I knew there was a watch in there. Told you we should have checked that when we first moved in." So I set the watch down and closed the box. And then I noticed something strange. There was a picture glued to the inside of the lid. When I opened it, I saw that it was a picture of my family. It was taken last week when we were doing our Christmas lights. However, the photo was partially scratched, and my face was completely removed from the picture. We tried to get the watch to stop ticking, but we couldn't. We wound it, we hit it. We even tried putting it in the microwave to see if that would stop it. But no matter what we did, that thing just kept on ticking. We ended up having to rip the whole wall out just to get to the watch. Took it to a local antique store, but they said that they weren't interested in watches that ticked. Said that they only wanted silent ones. So now we have a wall-sized hole in our living room and an antique pocket watch that whoa and stopped ticking. And that is the end of the story. This happened a few months ago, and it's still one of the creepiest things I've ever experienced. It was around 1 a.m., and I was awoken by my phone in my bed beside me. I checked it, and it was a voicemail from my brother. This isn't strange in itself because we call each other every few weeks. But what was strange was that his voice sounded extremely panicked. In the voicemail, he was saying, "Don't come to the house. It's not me." And then the line went dead. I tried calling back, but it just went to voicemail. I knew something was wrong. I tried to contact him through various social media platforms, but I didn't get a response. I ended up driving to his house in the middle of the night. As I got closer, my anxiety built. What did he mean by "it's not me"? Was someone else in the house? Was he in some kind of trouble? There were so many questions running through my head. As I pulled up outside, I noticed that all of the lights were turned off, except for one upstairs bedroom window, which had a lamp on beside it. My brother lived alone, so this was odd. I knocked on the door for a few seconds, and when he opened it, he was smiling. He looked very happy to see me, but then he stopped smiling when he noticed the confused look on my face. "What's wrong? Why are you looking like that?" Then I told him about the voicemail. He looked at me as if I was an idiot. "I never called you." Then I checked my phone and saw that the time on the voicemail was actually tomorrow's date and time. How could this be possible? He explained that he didn't know how to use the phone app on his new phone and must have accidentally pressed record and hung up without realizing it. I believed him and let it go. We chatted for a while, and I ended up staying over at his place that night. Later that night, after I'd gone to sleep, I was awoken to my phone going off again. I checked it, and it was another missed call from my brother. I was getting a bit freaked out now. I tried calling back, but it just went to voicemail. I decided to text him instead and asked him if everything was okay. I got no response. In the morning after, I finally managed to get a hold of him, and he sounded very embarrassed. "Sorry about last night," he said. "I tried to call you because I couldn't get into my account on the app and I needed your password. But yeah, sorry about the whole weird voicemail thing. Must have hit the record button or something." I told him it was fine and that I was glad he called me. Little did I know, he didn't call me at all. When I checked my phone, the missed call was from 2 hours ago, and the voicemail I received was still showing as being from tomorrow. To this day, I don't know what that voicemail was, and it's still one of the creepiest things that's ever happened to me. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. Which story made you want to rewind and watch again? Let me know in the comments. I'm going to subscribe for more true horror you won't forget.